Let me tell you, there is nothing wrong with you. You're just overloaded and not in the way that you think. Mental overload, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't signal a character flaw. It's a capacity misalignment. It's a capacity issue. The reframe that you need is compassion without containment leads to collapse. Clutter isn't just about stuff, it's a mirror of mental load. You're not necessarily falling apart, you're not necessarily failing, you're just buried. Well, hey friend, let me guess. You're tired. Not just physically tired, though I'm sure you're that too, but tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Tired in a way that a weekend off doesn't touch. Tired in a way that makes you feel like you're constantly running on fumes, even when you're doing fine. And here's what I also know about you. You're probably telling yourself you just need to try harder. You need to get more organized. You need to find a better system. Maybe if you just woke up earlier or meal prepped more or finally stuck to that evening routine, well, then you'd finally feel caught up. Then you'd feel okay. But deep down, you know that's not it. Because you've tried the planners, you've listened to the podcasts, you've downloaded the printables, and you've followed the productivity gurus, and you're still here, still overwhelmed, still stuck, still wondering what's wrong with you and why you can't seem to get it together. Let me tell you, there is nothing wrong with you. You're just overloaded and not in the way that you think. So, we're going to talk through this today. We're going to be having this conversation about what tired really means, what overload really means, but most importantly, what you can do about it. And so, with that, let's jump in and get started. Well, hey, friend. So, when most of us say that we're tired, what we really mean is that we're overwhelmed. But overwhelmed doesn't really define it either. And it's really a conversation that women are having. I think it's a definition. It's a label that we're being given for ourselves that doesn't really fit. So here's what I mean. When most of us say that we're overwhelmed, we're using one word to describe about 5 completely different experiences. We're lumping it all together in this giant, shapeless mass of too much. And then we're trying to fix it with surface level solutions that were never designed to address what's actually going on underneath. It's like trying to treat a headache when what you really are suffering from is dehydration or eye strain or tension in your shoulders or low blood sugar and not enough sleep. Sure, they're all going to make your head hurt, but the solution that you would take for each one of those different reasons is completely different. And that's what's happening with your overwhelm and your overload. It's not that you're just too busy. You're carrying specific types of weight. And until you can name which kind of overload you're dealing with, you're going to keep spinning your wheels trying to solve the wrong problem. And so here's what we're going to be doing today. I'm walking you through 5 types of overload that I see in almost every midlife woman that I work with. Not so that you can beat yourself up about carrying all of them, because spoiler alert, you probably are, but so that you can finally name what's actually heavy so that you can stop treating symptoms and start addressing the real issue. And I'm going to give you a first step for each one, not a 47-step action plan, just one thing that you can do to start unloading the weight that's crushing you right now, depending on what kind of overload you're experiencing. Because here's what I believe. You don't need to burn your whole life down to feel better. You don't need to quit everything or run away to start over from scratch. You just need to get honest about what you're carrying and give yourself permission to put some of it down. So let's jump in and get started. So the first type of overload is mental overload. And here's what it sounds like in your head. It's when you say things like, I can't stop thinking. My brain never shuts off. Not at night, not in the shower, not even when I'm trying to relax. Or you say, I'm so tired of making decisions. What's for dinner? What should I wear? What do we need at the store? Should I say yes or should I say no to this thing? I don't even know anymore. Or maybe you're saying, I feel like I'm holding everyone's schedule in my head. And if I let it go for 1 second, everything is going to fall apart. Does any of this sound familiar? Because if so, that's mental overload, and it's exhausting in a way that people don't understand because it's invisible. You can actually point to a messy house or something like that in a full calendar. And you can say, see, this is why I'm tired. But mental overload, you can't see it with your eyes. You can't quantify it. It doesn't live on lists or paper or schedule. It lives in your head, constantly spinning, and it's draining you essentially from the inside out. So why does mental load happen? Mental overload happens because you're not just managing your life, you're managing everyone's life. You're the family GPS, you're the walking calendar, you're the one who remembers the dentist appointment and the library book and the thing that your husband said he needed from the hardware store 3 days ago. You're carrying what researchers call invisible labor. It's all the thinking, all the planning, all the remembering, anticipating, and decision making that keeps a household running. And nobody sees it, probably not even you. Nobody appreciates it. Again, probably not even you. And most of the time, nobody knows you're doing it. Now, you feel the strain from it, right? You feel the overload, but you're probably not thinking about how all of those things are draining you day in and day out. And when your brain is constantly running in the background of, it's like 17 open tabs going all the time. It doesn't matter how much you sleep, you're always going to wake up tired because there's always this running going on. And so with mental overload then, what doesn't help? Well, most lists won't help. And I know that's probably not what you've probably been told, just write stuff down, get organized, use a better planner. And I say those things too. They aren't wrong, but they aren't going to address the issue, the problem of mental overload. Do you see how we're treating symptoms and we're not actually diagnosing and treating the actual problem? Because here's the thing, most structure isn't going to solve mental overload when the real problem is that there's no margin. There's no white space. There's no breathing room. There's no opportunity for your brain to actually rest. And adding more pressure, that's what we do, right? Try harder, do more, get more organized, get more particular. And all that does is add pressure. And adding pressure doesn't help either because telling yourself things like you should be able to handle this or other people are managing this just fine, then it just piles on the guilt and the shame on top of the exhaustion. So not only do you not have relief, you've made relief even further out of reach. You've made yourself more overloaded with all of that. And consuming more input, more podcasts, more books, more advice, it definitely doesn't help because mental overload, it isn't about not knowing enough. It's about your brain being too full to process essentially anything. And so here's the reframe that we need. You need to understand that you don't need to think harder. You need white space. You don't need to be smarter or more capable or better at managing your thoughts. I mean, these are important skills. Don't get me wrong. I teach them. I talk about them. But to address the issue of mental overload, these things aren't going to help. You need permission to stop holding everything in your head and have a place then to put it down instead. Mental overload, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't signal a character flaw. It's a capacity misalignment. It's a capacity issue. And the solution isn't more willpower, it's more margin. So if that's what the solution is, then what does the first step look like? Well, try what I call a brain dump boundary. Here's what I mean. Create one dedicated space, a notebook, a note in your phone, a document on your computer, where you can dump everything that's swirling in your head at any given time without having to organize it or prioritize it or do anything about it yet. Know that this is not the same as a to-do list. This is essentially a holding container. It's a holding space. And when a thought comes up and pops into your head, I need to remember to call the insurance company, write it down, and let it go. When you start spinning about a decision, should I sign up for that thing? Write it down and let it go. When you're lying in bed and you're rehearsing a conversation, write it down and let it go. The goal isn't to solve any of it. The goal is to get it out of your head so that your brain can stop working in overdrive to remember it all. And here's the boundary part. Decide when you're going to come back to it. Maybe it's on a Friday afternoon. Maybe it is a Sunday evening. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's once a day. But you don't have to think about any of those things until you get to that time, that appointed time, because it's written down. It's waiting for you. It will wait for you right there until you get to the appointed time. So it is okay to let your brain rest about it. That's the first step towards unlocking mental overload. It's not doing more, it's making space. So, mental overload, that is one type of overload. Another type of overload is, you guessed it, emotional overload. So, here's what that sounds like in your head. It sounds like, I can't carry everyone's emotions anymore. I can't make everything okay for everyone. I feel like a sponge. I'm soaking up everyone else's stress and everyone else's drama, everyone else's pain. Maybe you say, I walk into a room and I immediately feel an energy shift. I can tell when someone is upset, when there's tension, when something is off, and then I can't stop thinking about it. I have to try to get my hands in it and try to relieve some of it. You could say, I'm exhausted from being the emotional support person for pretty much everyone around me. This is what emotional overload looks like. And if you're nodding along, you're probably someone with a lot of empathy, someone who deeply feels what others are going through, someone who is wired to notice, to care, to help. And that is beautiful. That is a very beautiful and noble thing until it gets to the point where it is crushing you. So here's why this happens. Emotional overload happens when you absorb other people's feelings without any boundaries for yourself. You take on your teenager's anxiety about school, or your husband's frustration with work, your friend's marriage problems, your mom's worries about your dad, and you don't just hear these things, you carry them, you hold them, you lie awake at night thinking about them. Sometimes you're doing this because you care, but sometimes, and be honest with yourself here, sometimes you're doing it because you think that if you can just fix it or manage it or absorb enough of their pain, enough of their discomfort, enough of their struggle, then everything will be okay. And you want it to be okay for them because you want them to be okay. Then you'll finally be able to relax and let this go. But that's not how this works, because other people's emotions are not your responsibility to carry. And no amount of worrying on their behalf is going to solve or have any effect at all on their problems. So here's what doesn't help with emotional overload. Avoiding conflict doesn't help. And I know it feels easier in the moment to just keep peace, to not rock the boat, to just stay quiet and absorb whatever energy is being thrown at you. But all that does is really train people that you are the emotional dumping ground, that they can come to you and they can just unload on you. And staying nice doesn't help either, because you can be kind and not be the caretaker, the keeper of it all. You can be compassionate without taking on someone else's crisis as though it was your own. And pretending that you're fine when you're drowning in everyone else's emotions, well, that definitely doesn't help, because you're not fine. You're exhausted and you're allowed to admit that. So here's the reframe that you need if emotional overload is part of what you are feeling. The reframe that you need is compassion without containment leads to collapse. It's compassion gone wrong. You can care about someone deeply and still refuse to carry their emotional weight. You can hold space for someone's feelings without making those feelings your own, without internalizing them. You can be present without being responsible. Healthy empathy has boundaries. It says, I see you, I hear you, I care about you, and I trust you to work through this. It doesn't say, let me take this from you so that you don't have to feel it. Because when you do that, when you absorb it, when you fix it, when you manage it and carry everyone else's emotional load, you're not actually helping them. You're enabling them, and you're destroying yourself in the process. So the first step is this: identify whose crisis or crises you're carrying and give it back. It doesn't even have to be anything that you do with them. It can just be an eternal release. I want you to think about the last week. Whose emotions did you absorb? Whose worry did you take on as your own? Whose problem did you try to solve when it wasn't yours to solve? Write their name down and then ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped carrying this? Not what would happen if I stopped caring. Carrying and caring are different. But what if you stopped letting their emotions dictate your own peace, your own calm? What if you stopped lying awake at night, rehearsing solutions to their problems? What if you trusted them to handle their own life? That's what it looks like to release that emotional load back to them. And I get it. I hear you. It can feel a little bit selfish. It feels like you don't care when you do, but it's not. It's not an uncaring move. It's a healthy move because you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you keep soaking up everyone else's emotions, there's going to be nothing left for you and nothing left for you to give back to them either. So give it back. You're not giving it back with anger. You're not giving it back with resentment. And maybe you're not doing, again, anything that they even know you've done. But you're releasing this, you're giving it back with love and trust and the quiet confidence that they are capable and that you are not required to carry what isn't yours. So that's about emotional overload. Well, before we keep going, I want to pause for just a minute because if this episode is hitting close to home, I have something for you. If you feel overwhelmed or behind or like you're constantly resetting, but never really catching back up, nothing is wrong with you. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you're overloaded. And most women are trying to fix that without a framework. I created a free resource called the 4-Pillar Foundational Framework, and it walks you through the exact shifts that helped me stop spiraling and finally start to feel steady again. It's not about doing more, it's about clarity. It's about seeing what's actually happening. It's about capacity and honoring what you can really carry right now and what you can't. It's about learning how to carry life differently and building resilience so that when things fall apart, you know how to come back. So if you're tired of white knuckling through life and wondering why nothing seems to stick, this is where to start. You can download it for free at 4pillarfoundationalframework.com. There's no pressure, there's no hype, just something solid to stand on. So there you have it. Let's jump back in. Well, the third type of overload is physical overload. And here's what that kind of sounds like in your head. The house is a disaster. I can't stay on top of anything. The laundry, the dishes, the clutter, it's everywhere. Or I walk into a room and I immediately feel stressed because there's so much visual noise. I feel this one a lot. Maybe you say, everything feels like too much, like I'm constantly cleaning up, but I never get anywhere. This is what physical overload sounds like. And it's not just about being messy or disorganized, though that's what most people assume. It's about living in a space that creates that noise so that then it steals your peace instead of supporting it. And this happens because your environment is working against you instead of for you. Maybe you're holding on to things that you don't need because you feel guilty about letting them go. Maybe you're drowning in unfinished projects, half-folded laundry, half-sorted piles, half-done tasks that never quite get finished. Maybe you're living in a home that was designed for a different season of life, and now it doesn't fit who you are or what you need. And here's what most people don't talk about. Physical clutter, the stuff, is almost always a symptom of something deeper. It's a mirror of a mental load. It's a reflection of decision fatigue. It's what happens when you're too tired to deal with one more thing. So you set it down and you walk away, telling yourself you'll handle it and you'll deal with it when you have more energy, time, desire. But what do we know? We know that later never comes. And so the clutter piles up, the stuff piles up, and every time you walk past it, you feel a little bit worse about yourself. So here's what doesn't help. Guilt cleaning marathons, they don't help. You know what I'm talking about. It's that frantic weekend when you tear through the house, trying to get everything perfect, only to have it fall apart again by Tuesday. Unrealistic standards don't help either. Pinterest perfect homes, Instagram worthy playrooms, organization. The idea that if your house isn't organized and labeled and color coded, you're failing. That's not real life. That's performing. And nobody's got time for that. Beating yourself up about it doesn't help either because shame is never a strategy. It is always a bad idea because shame doesn't motivate change, contrary to what you might think. Shame does not motivate change. It just makes you feel worse, and it makes it harder to step forward. And so the reframe that you need here is that clutter isn't just about stuff. It's a mirror of mental load. When you look at the piles in your home, you're not just seeing things that need to be put away or gotten rid of. You're seeing unfinished decisions. You're seeing tasks that you don't have the mental bandwidth to complete. You're seeing evidence of how overloaded you are. You're seeing emotions that you're going to have to unlock them. You know they're going to come pouring out when you start working on that stuff over there. That's what you see. And the goal isn't perfection then. The goal is just peace. The goal is creating a space that supports you instead of draining you. And that starts with getting honest about what's really happening. Is it the emotions? Is it the perceived value? Is it the fact that it's all those decisions? Is it the fact that there's so much shame now? Is it the fact that you've told yourself, I can't believe you let it get this far for so many years? You're so far in such a deep hole that you can't even get out. What is it that's actually happening? You've got to get honest about that. It's not a matter of I just need to try harder, or I just need a new clutter product, or I just need a new step-by-step process. The system that you're using and that you've been trying time and time again, no matter what the system is, it isn't working. You need to understand that this space is not serving me and I need to let some of these things go. But in order to do that, I need to understand why they're there and why I'm hanging on to them. I call this your clutter language. But what are we going to do? How are we going to start moving forward if you know that it is physical clutter? Well, here's the first step. You're going to choose just one surface to clear, okay? Now, let me just back up for just a second and say, it is essential that you figure out what your clutter language is, as I call it. You need to figure out why you're hanging on to that stuff. That is essential because you need to treat the problem, and that language is going to help you figure out what the problem is. I've got a clutter quiz that will help you identify that. I'll put it down here in the notes, so you can go look for that. But here's your first step, because I want to give you something super actionable if it's physical overload. So you're going to choose this one surface area to clean. You're not going to organize, you're going to eliminate. It's not the whole house, it's not a whole room even. It's just one surface, one countertop, one table, a corner of your bedroom, one drawer. And here's the key. You're not organizing. You're not color coding bins or buying new baskets or creating a new system, even though I know that that's so exciting. And what makes that so exciting is that that's the fun part of decluttering. It's the organizing that comes after the hard work. But so often we do that part and we don't ever circle back to the hard work. So I get it. It's fun. It's exciting, but that is not what's going on here. You are simply eliminating. And so go through what's on that surface and ask, do I actually need this right now in my current life? Do I use this? Does this add value to my life, or is it just taking up space? Is it causing me stress? If it is not a quick yes, then it's a no. Donate it, trash it, give it away. I don't care what you do with it, but get it out of your space. Because physical overload isn't about needing better organization. It's about needing less stuff, less visual noise, less decision fatigue every time you walk into a room. Start with one surface, clear it completely, and notice how it feels to walk past that space for the next day, the next couple of days, and see that one space that is now free of clutter. That's the first step towards unloading this physical overload. It's not perfection. It's just one small little piece of peace. So the fourth type of overload is what I call identity overload. And here's what that sounds like. It sounds like I don't even know who I am anymore. I used to have hobbies. I used to have interests. I used to know who I was, but now I just feel empty. Or maybe you say, I've spent so long being a mom and a wife and a caretaker that I don't know who I am outside of those roles. Hello, midlife, right? Hello, empty nesting. This is a conversation that we midlife moms are having. Maybe you say, I feel like I've disappeared inside my own life. These kinds of conversations, they are identity overload. And it's one of the most painful types of overload to carry because it doesn't always show up in obvious ways. You're not necessarily falling apart. You're not necessarily failing. You're just buried. And this happens after years of serving and surviving and really self-sacrifice to do other things, to prioritize things outside of yourself. You've spent so long putting everyone else first, your kids, your spouse, your job, your aging parents, the volunteer things at school, that somewhere along the way, you stopped asking what you wanted. You even stopped noticing what you wanted, what you needed, what made you excited. Maybe you used to paint. Maybe you used to read for fun. Maybe you used to have dreams that had nothing to do with anyone else, but life got loud, responsibilities piled up, and now those parts of you got buried. And so now you're standing in the middle of your life looking around and thinking, is this it? Is this all I am now? And so here's what doesn't help. Self-help books that bypass grief don't help, because what you're feeling isn't just confusion, it's loss. Let me say that again. If you have identity overload, you are not just confused about who you are and where you're going, but you are also feeling lost. You're grieving the version of you that you used to be, the one who had the time and the energy and the dreams, the one who wasn't just a role, who wasn't just there to make sure that everyone else was okay. And you can't think your way through grief. You can't logic your way back to yourself again. You have to feel it and you have to acknowledge it and you have to give it space to just be. Trying to fix identity overload with busyness doesn't help either. Signing up for a new hobby just because you think you should. Filling your calendar with activities that don't actually fill you up at all don't help either. That's not reconnecting with yourself. That's just distraction. And so the reframe that you need to hear is this: you're not lost, you've just been buried. I think the whole lost conversation is one that is very prominent in conversations with midlife women these days. We're told that we're lost. We're not lost, we're just buried. The version of you that feels alive and confident and purposeful, she's still there. She didn't disappear. She just got covered up by years of everyone else's needs and expectations and demands. And the work that you need to do, it's not about becoming someone new, it's about excavating. It's about gently and patiently uncovering the parts of yourself that got buried along the way. You don't need to reinvent yourself, you need to reconnect with yourself. So, how do we do this? What's the first step? Ask yourself this question: what is the version of me that I am grieving? Name her. I can give you an example right here from me. I am grieving the part of me that had young kids at home. You know, the cute little itty bitty ones. Luckily, I've got grandkids, so that helps. But I miss that. I miss those in the middle of the night feedings. I know I'm weird. I never did mind them. But when the house was all quiet and it was just me and the baby or the young one, I miss that. I miss little ones coming and crawling into my bed. I miss all of that. Was it exhausting when I was there? Yes. But I miss it now. I'm grieving that. You need to name her. I want you to close your eyes for a second and think back. Before the chaos, before the roles took over, before you became everyone's everything, who were you? What did you love doing? What made you feel alive? What did you dream about? What could you not wait to have time for? Maybe you were the girl who danced in her living room. Maybe you were the woman who loved long runs or painting or writing poetry or going out and having a night out with friends. Maybe you were the one who hosted the dinner parties or traveled or built things with her hands. Maybe you gardened. Well, who was she and what happened to her? Name her, write it down, and then ask yourself, what would it look like to bring even one small piece of her back? What would that look like? Not all of her and not overnight, just one small step, one little piece of the hobby, one small part of the interest, one quiet moment where you do something just for you. That's the first step towards kind of unloading your identity overload. It's not a total intervention. It's just a slow, gentle return to the woman that you've been missing. So the fifth type of overload is system overload. And here's what that sounds like. Now, let me just kind of say this real quick. You can have multiple types of overload. You don't have to necessarily just identify with one. But know this: if you identify with more than one, does that make sense why you're so exhausted and you feel like you can't get ahead and you can't? Does that make sense of why you're just feeling like you're caught in this never-ending spiral? The answer is yes, that makes sense. I understand now. Okay, so back to the system overload. This is what it sounds like. My routines don't work anymore. I used to have everything under control, but now all I feel is chaos. Or I keep trying to stick to a schedule, but it keeps falling apart every time. Or I feel like I'm constantly starting over. I'm constantly trying again, and I'm exhausted from it. This is what system overload sounds like. And it's frustrating because you know you're capable. You know you can create a schedule. You've done it before, but for some reason, these things that used to work, they are not working anymore. And that's where that frustration comes in. So, system overload happens when your old systems no longer fit your current season. Maybe it's the routine that worked when your kids were little, but it doesn't work now because they're teenagers. Maybe the morning rhythm that you loved before you went back to work doesn't fit your new schedule that now includes work. Maybe the way that you used to handle and manage your household made sense 5 years ago, but life has changed and you're still trying to force everything to work with an outdated system. And here's what I see all of the time. Instead of pausing to ask, what's true now? You double down and you try harder. This has got to work. And you beat yourself up for not being able to make it work. And you convince yourself that the problem is you, but it's not you, it's the system. It's expired. And no amount of willpower or trying harder is going to make an expired system work. So, what doesn't help then is forcing outdated rhythms. If you're trying to wake up at 5 a.m. because you used to do that, but your life is completely different now, you're setting yourself up for failure. Not because you're lazy, but because the system might not fit anymore. Or copying someone else's plan or schedule or routine, well, that's not going to help either. And I know we see it on Instagram all the time, right? The perfect morning routine, the color coded schedule, the meal planning system that looks so easy. But those systems were built for someone else's life, not yours. And trying to do it all at once definitely doesn't help either because system overload isn't solved by overhauling everything. It's solved by taking one piece at a time and saying, what actually is working, what actually is not, and from that information, what needs to change. That's how we move forward. And so the reframe that you need in all of this for system overload is this: the system isn't broken, it's just expired. And you're not failing because you can't stick to a routine. You're failing because the routine was built for a version of your life that no longer exists, or it was built for someone else's life entirely. And that's okay. It is normal that you are going to see something and say, oh, that will work for me. That's my answer. Or that you are going to try to keep doing what you've always done. That's natural, right? That's what happens. And it's natural that it's not working anymore because life shifts. And it's been shifting probably constantly, little bits at a time for years. And so, what's the first step then? Well, you need to identify what used to work and ask what's true now. Think back to a time when you felt like you had your life together, when your routines were mostly working, when you felt like you were mostly on top of things. What was true about your life back then? What did it look like? Maybe your kids were younger and more predictable. Maybe you weren't driving as much. Maybe you had more help. Maybe you were working part-time instead of full-time. Maybe you had more energy. And now ask, but what's true now? What's different? What's changed? And what does that mean for the systems that you're trying to force into place now? Because once you can name the gap between what was and what is, then you can start building something that actually works. And it's no longer this fantasy system that's not based in reality. And it's not someone else's system either. It's a real life system that fits your real life. And that's really the first step towards unlocking system overload. It's not more discipline. It's not trying harder. It's more honesty. So, okay, now that you've heard all five, you've heard mental overload, you've heard emotional overload, you've heard physical overload, identity overload, and system overload. What I want you to ask is this: which one hit the hardest? Again, you might have identified with more than one, but which one hit you most squarely? Which one made you think, oh my gosh, that's me? That's exactly what I'm dealing with. Because here's the thing: if you are carrying more than one, know that most women are, but there's usually one that's heavier than the rest. There's one that is stealing more of your peace and your calm and your clarity than the others. And I want you to name just that one. And that's where you're going to start. You can move to the others, but you're going to pick the one that feels like it hit home the most, and you're going to start with that particular overload piece. And you're going to put into place what we talked about here today. Because naming it is the first step towards releasing it. And here's the thing: you don't actually have to do that alone. That's what I'm here for. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. It's this whole knowledge, and truly embrace this truth that you're not broken, you're just overloaded. And overload isn't just one thing. It's 5 very specific and very different things. And until you can name which one you're dealing with, you're going to forever keep trying to solve the wrong problem or just the generic overload problem, and it's not going to do the trick. Well, hey, friend, if you are tired of programs, if the idea of keeping up with another class makes you want to opt out completely, I want to tell you about something different. The Connection Circle for Women is not another class. It's not another commitment on your calendar, and it's definitely not a place where you have to show up on time or prepared or where you have to do it right. The Connection Circle for Women is a 90-day space for support, encouragement, and real conversation. I show up there weekly, but not with a curriculum. Sometimes it's a live check-in. Sometimes it's a conversation thread that goes on and on among the women there. Sometimes it's a short story from my own messy, real life, and it's also a safe place for you to share what you've got going on, or what you need support in. There's no pressure to attend anything live or show up on any sort of daily schedule. There's no falling behind, there's no homework. It's come as you are, when you can, however you need. This is about conversation, not lectures. It's about presence, not performance. It's about connection, not fixing. And so if you're craving a space where you can just be honest, be supported, and not carry everything alone anymore, you can learn more at theconnectioncircleforwomen.com. It's not about being taught. It's about having conversations and feeling seen and heard and understood for what might be the first time in a very long time. I'd love to see you there. You don't need to try harder. You don't need to hustle more. You don't need to buy another planner or another productivity hack. And you don't need another pep talk telling you just to keep going, just push through. You need honesty. You need clarity. You need permission to put down what is crushing you. And then you need the tools to actually start making it better. This is what I help women unpack all the time, because the truth is you can't just think your way out of overload. You need a process. You need support. You need frameworks. You need someone who's been there or who can walk you through it step by step. So that's what I do with the women I work with every single day. So here's where you're going to go from here. You're going to name your overload. You're going to speak it out loud, and you're going to write it down. Maybe even tell someone, because you can't release what you can't or won't acknowledge. And you deserve to carry your life differently, because when you do, that's when peace and clarity and calm can open back up. And if knowing what your clutter language is something you need to do, make sure you check the notes along with this episode so that you can grab that clutter quiz, and maybe you'll find that helpful as well. Okay? So until we talk again, make it a great day.